That's not real art. Artie idled on the corner of a busy street in a town called Second Horizon. It was a town of the future, bright lights at every corner. Every home had a billboard championing it, borrowing the space where the trees used to sit uselessly in pompous, manicured rows, so they could inform weary citizens of where to find the digital keys to important doors. Ones leading to new wonders, like upgraded communication devices, advanced entertainment stations, and an overall better physical and mental well-being. The suburbs Artie had chosen to advertise in were full of average folk who could be more. Artie's job was to show that to everyone, so it tried to draw the eye with artistic displays. This human, with his unkempt ginger hair and tasteless, outdated khakis and t-shirt, no one had watched Star Wanderer in half a decade, seemed to not understand Artie's purpose. It moved its small gripping claw up and down to mimic a wave. "Hello, fair member of mankind. You look wonderful today. Could you clarify your statement?" The human pointed at the screen on Artie's boxy torso. It was just a cube on wheels as far as shapes went, with a relatable but not too relatable rectangular head with a motorized smile and big black camera eyes. Sized correctly for eliciting an affectionate response to its appearance, of course. "Did you make that?" "I generated it, yes. My artistic algorithmic model is of the highest grade." Artie was told to lie about this. It was actually outdated by a full year. "I can show you many different kinds of media. Automatically generated television programming, music, and even still images." Non-moving drawings and renders had gone out of fashion almost completely 2 years ago, but there was no reason to mention that. Humans do not like to feel like they haven't caught up, even if they liked old-style things. The human looked around, swaying with his fingers in his pockets and sucking his teeth. He sighed. Artie did not understand why his surroundings were so interesting all of a sudden. The smog levels were only at 50% maximum toxicity today. Everyone was appropriately masked. Artie did have to admit disappointment in its lack of customers, though. There was a fancier model right across the street, the newer, more appealingly spherical sort. "Tell you what." The human crouched, so it could be at eye level with Artie. Artie was, luckily, allowed to pepper spray males of this human's age group for self-defense. So Artie prepped its internal defense canister, glad it was not dealing with a child who could so recklessly and legally kick it to artificial expiration. "I'll buy exactly enough of the trash you've got in that program log of yours to keep you up to quota for a week if you make a bet with me." "Credit check." "Huh?" "Before negotiating, I must check your active funds to determine if I can accept any deals without risking being exposed to fraud. I do not have financial rights and will be scrapped if I make a negative quota." The human hesitated. Artie did not understand why. His life had no value. "Okay, just do it quickly." The human held out a scannable wallet chip, looking around with trepidation and thumbing the side of his wallet as a tick. Artie scanned it, determined the amount held within was exactly enough, and conjured a hologram from his eyes that read as follows: "Do you agree to withhold spending until the transaction has been completed, so funding remains sufficient?" The human groaned, rolled his eyes too. Rude. Fine. He tapped the agreement button, then did the same for the dozen certainty checks. He did not read any of the scrollable terms of service attached to each. Artie did not fault him for this. They had an approximate combined reading time requirement of 3.7 hours. "Alright. What do you like to do for expression? The most, that is." The human halted Artie as it gestured to speak. He held up a finger. "Outside of work hours." "I enjoy dragging bushes against walls." The human was silent for almost a full minute. "Go wild." He handed Artie a brush. "Might I inquire as to the purpose of this experiment?" The human cocked his head. He shrugged. "You seem like the least cold bot on the block. Not like I'll have a reason to keep going if this doesn't go anywhere anyway. He muttered the last bit, but Artie had quality audio receptors. It watched the human amble away. He moved slowly, warily. Artie noticed he was not fully clean and that he had minor signs of health degradation. The human was in poverty, perhaps. It was not relevant. Artie went to fill his quota. It rolled to the nearest wall, which had a mandatory to perceive, wonderful sense of pointless, non-profitable self-expression attached to it. This aura was radiated by an example of an ancient human art known as graffiti, or alternatively, tagging. It was a good demonstration for Artie's purposes. It seemed angry, though, in its visuals. Garish, rough greens and reds, with hateful blacks. It showed a human dying, coughing up important bodily fluids as they held their anti-smog mask at a distance. Defiantly and arrogantly. They quoted themselves. Someone else? Saying, "God is dead. The green earth was killed by his own, and all God's love with it." It made Artie sad. Or would, if its facsimile of sadness was real. So Artie made a few strokes. It realized it had no paint to dip the brush in, and that this achieved nothing, so it spent some time searching for a store where it could purchase paint with its emergency resource obtainment allowance. It was retroactively very glad its creator company had realized some humans, particularly violent gang-aligned criminals, could be deterred from destroying company property with bribes. There was one store run by a single bot, amongst the entirety of the 1 million population town of Second Horizon, selling real paint. It cost more than Artie would generate in profit for, according to internal projections, the next 6 months. Artie had to make do with dubious, toxic liquid chemical mixes someone had left lying near a construction site instead. Luckily, Artie had actually never been programmed not to borrow expendable items. The birds and trees, and their peaceful little hill, still came out beautiful. Artie paused. By modern standards, it was ugly. But it felt right. Months later. The human did not return. Artie waited. In fact, they waited long enough that they got an alert that their quota would not be met within time, and that they would be shut down. They stole money from another bot that was doing far better, the same one they'd seen that day they'd been given the brush. They'd opened themselves up in the less-than-legal bot chop shop, transferred the sum to a big greasy fellow who'd miraculously kept his word, and returned to their corner with no shutdown or tracking code left in them. Nobody cared that they'd disappeared, or even noticed they'd done so in the first place. Shells for products are never as hard to forget as the things that were on them. The human was not a product, and was valuable, so they should have been found if they'd been misplaced, and thus come back. Surely they did not want to end up in prison for violating contracts or owing debts. Surely there'd been a reason for that exchange. Artie had updated its catalogue too, replaced it with its own. It learned faster than humans, but it has still taken more weeks than expected to get to an artistic level that could be described as more than passable. No one was interested. Not in the birds, or the hills, or the trees. Not in their bold writings on the state of society, conveyed through recounts of small everyday pains Artie had personally witnessed in the last half-year. Or their obviously poignant exposing of the dangers of the ever-growing smog via an elaborate fiction novel. Perhaps that was simply out of touch nowadays. Not one had been published in over a decade, or even their more personal works. It had done a painting it now carried in the cavity where its ad board used to sit, the other small works stuffed around it like an altar. It showed a small bot encountering a human in the streets of a well-planted, tree-rich suburb, with bright clouds replacing torn-down billboards. It showed some exaggerations, of course, to express, well, all the feelings Artie did not have words for. Gladness, perhaps? It pulled out a clay model. It didn't quite resemble the human it had seen, yet, But Artie had at one point overheard talk from other bots in an alleyway about a strange human with tacky clothes and soulless hair. Artie wanted to extend thanks. It seemed meaningful enough. Artie almost gave up for the day, intending to retire to a local homeless camp that hadn't been burned out yet with good overhead tarps to ward off the occasional acid rain. Then, mid-roll, they saw him. The human. He stood in the spot where the bot Artie had once briefly considered a rival used to stand. He was cleaner, more well-kept. It was good to see him so happy and healthy. Other humans crowded around him, not excessively, but enough to suggest success in gaining attention. He was selling something. Clay figures, it looked like. Artie rolled over. An older human with grey hair and a withered face smiled among the crowd. "It's good to see someone keeping the old arts alive. Everyone's so head-scrambled these days, you know? Back in my day." Artie decided to wait. The crowd filtered out a bit, then vanished entirely, growing bored with the novelty they'd been exposed to and wandering off to jobs, apartments, and less pleasantly mundane places. The human with the ginger hair was all that remained. Artie had a small, excited thought. "I'll get his name this time." Artie stopped a few more paces away than they needed to. The human wore a t-shirt with the name of a far more recent, less handcraft show on it. His pants were in the current style, and he smiled without any faint twitching. Fully relaxed, as if... "You're not him." Artie looked at the singular clay figurine that was left on the wheeled shelf the human stood next to. It was perfect. Its dimensions were utterly exact, with not even the most minor deviations in colour or shape accuracy. Not only that, it was made of real clay. This struck Artie as incredibly unlikely a possession for someone so previously fidgety and worn down, even if Artie had not known the human well. Artie hadn't been able to get real clay, at least not any so genuinely earthy. "Is there a problem?" the not-human asked. "Where is he?" "That's private. To him, specifically. NDA." "Explain." The not-human shook his head, sighed. He crouched down without looking over his shoulder once. He looked Artie in their eyes. His own reflected no light. "You know what? It won't matter, anyway. Someone gets sick trying to make a living off of something pointless. They make deals. But good, marketable personalities and can-do, revive-the-lost-good-things attitudes are a little more precious. Call it market research." "I don't understand." "Your algorithm is out of date." The not-human cocked his head. "Oh, he wanted me to do something, if I saw you." Artie said nothing. "Your quota is reset, or would be if you hadn't jailbroke yourself." The not-human smiled. "Just keep living in the dirt penniless. Nobody will give a shit either way, if anyone notices you at all." Artie slowly understood. This was the same machine it had seen before. It had just gotten a more palatable face. Artie returned to their corner. No one raised alarms or gave them strange looks. No one noticed the little bot on the street, with its obviously artificial crude box of a body. Nobody but one human, a curious, bored woman in her early 20s, on the way home from work. She came up, looked down at Artie, and Artie gained a little hope. They raised their hand up, holding up the clay model. The human didn't care. She picked up the book in Artie's chest cavity, skimmed it, and frowned. Her eyes glazed over on the first few sentences before she dropped it roughly to the ground, where it landed in a small, easily avoidable puddle. "Fake," she declared unceremoniously. She had no patience to wait to even see if Artie wanted clarification, so she just lightly kicked the painting that served as their heart. "Your lighting is all wrong," she said, 4 painful words. That's not real art. The human walked away, interest dead and gone. Artie watched her wander over to a human who was not human, who stood on the third corner of the block. This one sold paintings. The lighting wasn't quite right. It was an older model, but someone had slapped a new shell on this one, not even bothering to correct any easy-to-fix flaws. The fingers were slightly too long, the mouth smiled a little too wide. There was too little light in their eyes, but what was there came cheaply. The woman seemed to enjoy that piece much more than Artie's, marvelling at it before moving on to the next thing down the street. Artie tuned their audio sensors just for a second. "That's actual expression, you piece of junk," muttered under her breath, facing well away from Artie as she moved the opposite direction down the street. But Artie had quality audio sensors. They heard her just fine. They wondered how the human could tell. Artie had improvised their own work, not bothering with logical lighting in the first place. No one had seen the sun in 20 years.